Yeah. Okay. Wasn't paying attention to the beginning of the video there. Hi. This is the 6th lecture I've done in the last couple days, so bear with me if there's a few mistakes. We're just going to gloss over them and continue on our way. This is a Composition 2 class. This is a makeup class for Tuesday, October 3rd. If that's wrong, then you know what I mean. Kechanjal, Open Sky Day, Korean Foundation Day. So this is for both classes. This is only going to happen once this semester, so this is my favorite chapter, as I told you. It's called Food. There's 2 parts to it. My own title for this lecture is called Nourishment. I think this is an appropriate title because living in a country where there's enough food for everyone to eat, and we import all varieties of food from across the world, refrigerate them or seal them or can them and transport them all over the place. We're lucky to live in a time where we have access to food that used to be luxuries that people would kill for, literally, pay piles of gold for, and now we can just see them on our kitchen table every night. My first example is black pepper. It's one of my favorite examples of spices because apparently Western people began to be obsessed with putting pepper on their food thousands of years ago. And the Roman Empire became wealthy and large enough and wealthy enough to access trade routes going from the coast of, I guess it's Malabar, the coast of India. Anyways, the black pepper was originated in India, and it was taken across India or by boat through Persia, the Arab Peninsula, Turkey, into the Mediterranean or on a land route. These trade routes would exist for millennia. When the Mongols, Genghis Khan comes along and conquers all of Asia, there's already silk roads that connect China all the way across. Just the Mongolians sort of streamline the connection between Eurasia, Africa, the Middle East. All these connections get safer. So this is the early version of this. I guess it's not the first east to west or west to east trade that goes on between China and the West, but certainly it's some of the best documented evidence that we have. The Romans were wealthy enough, some of them, to eat excessively and just eat for pleasure, just to overeat, just to enjoy their food as much as possible. They used to have really elaborate banquets where they'd have animals stuffed with other animals, and when you eat them, birds would fly out of the animals and stuff. Some pretty extreme, exotic behavior that's kind of unnecessary, especially since there were bread riots all the time because people were starving in Rome. But anyway, the upper class of the Roman Empire, they had access to black pepper, and they had to pay a lot for it because it was very difficult. It would be literally like shipping black pepper to the moon. If you're on the moon, your package of black pepper is probably very precious. You're not going to get any more anytime soon. There's a limited amount of it, and how much somebody would pay for that if there was some sort of disruption of spices, I don't know. But in the ancient period, in the classical Western period of Rome, they paid a lot, and they usually didn't have other things to trade or barter with. So usually it was in the form of gold or precious metals, and that's the direction that the coins went to pay for their insatiable, that's a good word. Where's my pen? As I said, just going to keep going. They had an insatiable thirst, desire for pepper. I shouldn't say thirst because it's not a drink, but they, another similar word, insatiable means you can't satisfy. You can't satisfy it. You can never get enough of it. Obviously, now there's so much black pepper that you can go to Home Plus and you can get it for like $4. But in the Roman period, that's how precious that black pepper was. And then later, 1,000 years later, after the Roman Empire collapsed, Europeans again made contact by ship going around Africa, and Magellan went the other way to the Philippines across the Pacific. And they wanted nutmeg and cloves and other spices. They were so expensive that if you made it to Southeast Asia or India and got a ship full of spices and managed to get back, that would be like winning the lottery pretty much. It's you'd be set for life. So foods obviously, certain types of foods are plentiful, but so are people. So the foods that support us the most, the best, are called staple foods. And this is because a staple is something reliable, something that you can depend on. Rice, corn, wheat, potatoes. These are examples of staple foods. Everybody has access to them, and when access is disrupted for one reason or another, it causes the people at the bottom of the social of the society to begin to starve, right? Because poor people have a limited, people who have less money have less access to different types of food. You all know that if you go to the fruit section and there's exotic fruits that are imported from far away, that they are very expensive, especially when they're out of season. Watermelons are a good example. Everything's expensive in Canada when I go back there. That's where I'm from. I think I mentioned that. And eating at a restaurant in Canada is becoming unaffordable, basically. It's so expensive just to even have a McDonald's or Wendy's or Burger King. But as far as produce that's in season is concerned, I've never had to pay $5 for an apple before, but this Chuseok, there's boxes of things, of pears and apples and melons and stuff like that, and I can't believe how expensive they are. I know recently there's been a lot of inflation and supply chain problems, and COVID disrupted things, and there's war in certain parts of the world interrupting the food supply. But still, it's just something that I never saw when I was growing up, that I never imagined that an apple, I came from an area in Canada which is known for its apple orchards, and they were hanging from the trees on the way to school. Not that I was stealing apples at the time, but they were everywhere, and bags for $10, big huge bags full of apples, of like 20, 30 apples for $10, and now I see in Home Plus it's $20 for 4. So I don't know where things are going, but this is a security issue when you're importing a lot of food. South Korea has a big population and a small land area, as you know, and it's not the most fertile place in the world. Lots of mountains. The farther you go south, the better the soil tends to be, and the more moderate the climate. So South Korea is more fortunate than North Korea that way, but food security is a serious issue in Korea, and something that everybody needs to think about. My hobby is, well, I have many hobbies, but a hobby I refuse to give up is just growing boxes of vegetables, basically outside my window. I call it my window garden. I live on the first floor of an apartment, so just outside my window, there's enough sun, just enough sun to grow peas and radishes and sangchu lettuce. I grew turnips one time. I can't grow tomatoes or peppers because they need more sun than my window gets, because I'm on the first floor and the apartment buildings block the sun. But I still, every spring and every fall, I bring in. I grew garlic. That was a good deal. I only paid about $10 for the garlic, and I made enough to last for several months. So being less dependent on importing foods or supply chains that give you food is not just an issue for our writing class. It's not just a fun topic to talk about, because the Romans liked black pepper, and they had enough money to bring it all the way from India through, thousands of kilometers of dangerous roads and kingdoms. But it's also a present day issue. Now, we need food, obviously. That's how we keep ourselves alive. You can't live without food. So the nourishment part of it is just keeping your body going, giving yourself energy and nutrients to keep your body going. But the other part of it, the nourishment, that's why I like the word, because it sort of also means taking care and giving yourself a bit of, comfort, I guess. It's not pure pleasure in that sense, but there is a philosophy, or philosophers who subscribe to this school of thought. Epicurus is the person that this is named after, and a person who's an Epicurean is the simplest definition of it is a pleasure seeker. But that's not exactly how the Greeks saw it. It was just they believe that life is about avoiding pain and maximizing pleasure. So it doesn't mean necessarily that they're lazy or relaxing or like have a whole bunch of people dropping grapes in their mouths or something like that. Sometimes people get the impression that Epicureans are lazy and not hardworking or something like that. But whatever gives you pleasure, right? Even if pain indirectly is part of what you're doing. For example, athletics, going to the gym and working out, you're going to experience some pain. But if this small amount of pain or this discomfort provides you with a lot of pleasure, then an Epicurean would do it. It's the same thing an Epicurean would do with a fancy meal. If it takes you 6 hours to cook this food, and you're sweating over the stove, and you're worried that your guests are not going to like what you cook and stuff like that, but it turns out to be an amazing feast, and everybody compliments you on how delicious the food is, and you're satisfied and you taste it, it's worth it, right? So Epicureans, in one sense, they're pleasure-seeking people, but it's not really as simple as that. It doesn't have to be avoidance of all displeasure or pain, but basically they're looking to maximize their pleasure versus the pain they experience. There was anyway a Facebook group. I don't really pay that much attention to Facebook anymore compared to what I did in the past, but I know all of you use Instagram or TikTok or something else. But there was a Facebook group called Daejeon Epicureans, which was just a bunch of people sharing which restaurants they liked. It was mostly foreigners because we didn't. If you come to Daejeon, you just don't know where the good restaurants are. I've had students in a communication conversation class do presentations about the best places to go to eat in Daejeon, and I always write it down and try and check out the restaurants, because even though I've been here a long time, I sometimes don't know where to go. So this the stuff I'm talking about is related to the article in the textbook. So before I go any further, I should write down. This is page 28. There's some questions. You have to read about potatoes. Okay. I'm not going to read it out loud to you because I think you can do that on your own. I want you to do the usual thing. I'll post this, but it's page 33 to 35. And it's the questions about comprehension and vocabulary, discussion, and critical thinking. But I'll post that so you can submit that assignment by next week, by next Tuesday. 2 weeks from now, I'm going to have you do a writing assignment, which is based on the origin of a whole food. Okay? So I will talk to you in class about this to clarify, but this is what I mean. Kimchi is a Korean dish, which is made from certain vegetable. You can do cabbage or a cucumber, whatever you want, as you know, and you ferment it using anchovies and salt and sugar and a bunch of red pepper paste, right? I'm saying all these things in English because this is English class. I know that's not how you say it in Korean. Gochujang and all the ingredients. I've seen kimchi made. I've participated in it, and it's a sort of cultural. It's a very dear Korean cultural tradition, right? The fact of the matter is, though, that some of the ingredients come from other places, and in order to make spicy kimchi, there had to be a connection between the New World, what we used to call the New World. That's not the best way to describe it. Between North and South America and Asia, and they had to exchange. Christopher Columbus was the one who initiated this massive exchange of everything: human beings, plants, animals, diseases. There was some very negative effects of this exchange. The positive thing was all these varieties of food being spread all over the world, and new types of crops being able to support people in different places. For example, corn comes from Mexico, and before there was corn, people in East Asia had to only eat rice. They didn't have another staple option. They didn't have potatoes. Potatoes are from South America. There were no potatoes in China, and there was no corn in China, and there was no hot peppers either. Believe it or not, all these places in Asia that love hot peppers, all of those peppers originally came from Mexico. So I know now maybe the king of spicy food could be Korea or India or Thailand rather than Mexico, but originally there was no competition because that's where all the hot peppers came from. The Portuguese spread them all over the world, thinking that they needed something to trade, and this might be something that people were attracted to, because in Mexico, native people used to add them to their food. And it turned out to be correct, although it never had the same sort of exchange value as cloves or black pepper or nutmeg. But they did bring it with them and exchange it with people around the world, including the Japanese, Koreans, and Chinese. So all these spicy dishes that you can enjoy, this is a result of globalization, along with all the bad things. won't discuss those at this point because I don't want to make this video too long. But food, we'll say food issues, things related to food. I want that to be one part of the assignment. First, I want you to choose a food. So you can choose cabbage, right? And cabbage is one ingredient in kimchi. And then you can talk about where cabbage came from, the genetic background of it, how people used to use it, and then how kimchi developed as a certain type of food that makes use of cabbage, and cabbage is an essential ingredient. I think most people's favorite type of kimchi is the red spicy one. I know there's white kimchi too, which doesn't use those peppers, and supposedly that type of fermented kimchi has been in Korea much longer, going back to the Three Kingdoms period or earlier. So the same thing would go for coffee or chocolate or beer. Those are not edible plants, right? You have to choose an edible plant, right? Like cacao, or barley, or wheat. So you can't even spaghetti or noodles, rice noodles don't work because they're processed food. So it has to be unprocessed edible plant you start with, and you talk about where that comes from. So it'll be somewhere in the world. I learned after first studying this book maybe 10 years ago, I learned that apples genetically, their ancestors come from Kazakhstan, apparently, Central Asia. I mean, there's an expression in America, as American as apple pie, right? Like the most American thing you can think of is apple pie, except apples come from Kazakhstan. So that's not the most American thing. Maybe something like blueberries, because blueberries are native to North America, and they would have grown somewhere, in the bushes and been collected by Native Americans. Blueberry pie, as American as blueberry pie. There's no alliteration though, right? American apple pie, AA. It doesn't work as well. That's the English major in me talking, English literature professor. I do love alliteration, so I appreciate the double A's in American and apple pie. So that's what you got to do. Choose a main whole food that's edible, and talk about the history, the origin of that plant. That's the assignment for 2 weeks from now. That's going to be the first response paper. So we'll talk about that, but you can just think about the topic as you're watching this lecture and as you're considering the issues. So the first part should be about history and origin, and the second part can be something, what's the significance of this food? Is it a staple food? Is it a luxury item? Is it expensive? Is it cheap? What kinds of foods can be made from it? Is it in danger? Once you read about the potatoes, they do tell you some interesting stories about potatoes. They're kind of random. When you're reading this chapter, please pay attention to how they put together the article, because as I told you, we're going to criticize each one of these things in turn, because each article kind of has its own weak point. And they give you all these interesting stories about potatoes, but they seem pretty random. If you see a pattern, please show it to me, because I'm not sure how much John F. Kennedy is related to potatoes, other than the fact that he's descended from Irish people, and Irish people are proud of the fact that he became president of the United States. It doesn't really have much to do with the history of potatoes or the famine in Ireland, which that itself is an important thing. But if you're going to write a paper, you got to focus your paper on something like monocultural food, taking certain potatoes and well, we do GMO, we do genetically modified organisms now, but you could have still, bred a potato to be a certain type, big and yellow and round. And you will see in the picture, you can see this. Those don't look like potatoes, but those are real potatoes. So these are sort of original potatoes. That there are all kinds of different varieties. Just search on Google like potato varieties in Peru, and you will find all these strange shapes, different colors and everything. You can do the same thing with tomatoes. I had fun with this when I first learned that this was what potatoes really look like. You can really change a plant, a food source, and customize it the way you want. Just look at all the food that was out for Chuseok. These gigantic red apples with no blemishes, and they're perfectly round, and they're as big as your head. Obviously, they've been changed, and the original apple was probably a small, shriveled thing that's as big as your thumb and tasted really sour. But over hundreds of years of cultivation and selective breeding of these plants, you can get you can customize them basically, and now we can do it with genetic manipulation, but you can just do it by breeding the plants. Corn, supposedly, the corn that we have now is like 25 centimeters long, almost a foot long, big yellow kernels and exploding with flavor. My favorite type is called peaches and cream. It's white and yellow, and it's just it's delicious. It's really sweet. But the original corn was just this small little thing that was really bitter, and it the South American people, tribes of people, cultivated them for hundreds of years until they evolved into something that they could eat and support huge numbers of people, millions of people. Corn is still an essential staple food in South America and Mexico. Okay, so that's basically what I wanted to say today. Look for the assignment that's going to be posted. One will be due the Tuesday that we come back after the next holiday, Monday. And the second one will be due the next Tuesday after that. And then there will be no homework during midterms. Okay? So thank you for listening. We'll talk more about this in class, but that's your introduction to the topic. So I'll see you next Tuesday. Enjoy the rest of your holiday.